Welcome to the videos where I'm breaking down the Thursday Night Football Showdown slate between the New York Giants and the Washington Football Team, and which should honestly be a bit of an ugly game here. Only a 41-point over/under, no Ryan Fitzpatrick, Saquon Barkley still isn't fully healthy, and this is definitely, compared to last week's Thursday night game between the Buccaneers and the Cowboys, definitely a big downgrade, but it's football nonetheless, so I think we should still be excited. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that, to all the extra content, including my spreadsheets, ownership projections, my optimizer, as well as the Discord community. So if you want to check it out, link is down below. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props that they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, for new signing over on Prize Picks, you can use code CPENN to get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and it's honestly not that great here. We have Daniel Jones up top at $10,400 in a brutal matchup versus Washington. Then we have Taylor Heinicke filling in for Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was really fun and exciting in that playoff game last year, but still not that great, but gets a better matchup here versus the New York Football Giants. And if I had to pick between the two, I'm obviously going to side with Heinicke. I like the skill position players of Washington more. I like Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic out of the backfield. You have Brown, who's really cheap and played a lot of snaps last week. I think he's definitely a very good value play. You have a good tight end in Logan Thomas. So I'm going to side with Heinicke. I think he's fine in the flex spot. Not sure if I want to go captain Heinicke. I'd rather get one of his skill position players. But if you want to throw him in the flex spot, I think that's probably a safe way to go about it. I know this game only features a 41-point over-under, so you really can't expect many points to be scored. And even Washington, they're the favorites here, but they only have a 22.25 implied team total compared to the Giants being at 18.75. And this matchup for Daniel Jones is absolutely brutal. Last season versus quarterbacks, Washington allowed the fourth fewest points per game, and they were second DVA versus the pass, only allowing 210 passing yards per game. Also, according to PFF this week, the Giants have one of the worst offensive line versus defensive line pass blocking matchups of the entire week. So I think Daniel Jones is going to have a lot of pressure in his face. He loves fumbling the ball. He doesn't mind turning it over either. So I definitely not in love with Daniel Jones. He's a fine flex play just because he's the quarterback and he's below $11,000. But to be honest, if you want to fade Daniel Jones, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I don't think I'll have any captain Daniel Jones spots outside if I'm building 150 lineups. As for Taylor Heinicke, I'm only playing him just because I'm playing his pass catching options. Let's for 22nd DVA versus the pass, despite only allowing the 6th fewest points per game to the quarterback position. And again, if this was a main slate, I have zero interest in really any of these players from anybody in this game. But since it's a showdown slate, we had to pick some of these guys. Taylor Heinicke will be in a good chunk of my lineups at the flex spot. Maybe sneak into a few in the captain spot if you want to go quarterback there. But I typically like using one of the pass catching options or a running back or whatever in the captain spot. Moving over to our lineup, I just want to throw in Heinicke as for right now. If we can fit in Daniel Jones at the end, great. But I don't think he's a must play by any means because I want to afford Antonio Gibson, McLaurin over Daniel Jones. So if we can fit those guys in, plus getting Daniel Jones at the end, great. If not, though, I don't think it's the end of the world. Moving on to the running back position, we'll start with the backfield for the football team first. We have Antonio Gibson, close to $10,000, but seems a bit underpriced here, $9,600. He played over 60% of the snaps last week. He was involved on the ground with 20 rushing attempts. Also had a handful of targets. Now we have J.D. McKissic, more of the pass-catching back, at least last year. Didn't have any targets last week, but he still played over 30% of the snaps, so he does have a role in this team, and he's only $2,200. Now, obviously, the preferred option here, it's Gibson, although you're paying a pretty penny for it, but I do think he's one of the absolute best plays in the entire slate here. The Washington Football Team is 3.5-point favorites. They're playing at home. Got Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. They're probably just going to want to pound the rock with Antonio Gibson as much as possible, which is something you could do versus the Giants last year. For mid-pack DVA-wise versus the run, but they were still 22nd versus running backs. Antonio Gibson is one of the best running backs in football. He's a good pass-catching option. And last week, the volume was really good. He had 90 rushing yards on 20 rushing attempts, which the volume alone just on the ground is good enough for me to play him at $9,600. But the 5 targets equated to a 24% target share. I will take that each and every single day. So Gibson, one of my favorite plays in the entire slate. I think you'll play him in the captain spot, but definitely a good flex play. Then to his teammate J.D. McKissic, he didn't have anything through the air last week, which is kind of odd because last year he was the big pass-catching back, but Antonio Gibson is a very good pass-catching option. I mean, we saw that in college, but at $2,200, he played over 30% of the snaps last week, so he does have a role in this team. The problem is, I assume they're going to be playing with the lead for the most part, so this will probably be the Antonio Gibson show on the ground. But at $2,200, I think he is a viable, cheap option here because he doesn't project that bad. And a guy that plays over 30% of the snaps at $2,200 at running back, he should get a couple of touches. I know he had 1 rushing attempt last week, but he's going to be on the field, and I don't hate that as a value play at $2,200. And as for the Giants backfield, this is mainly a stay away situation for me because who the heck knows what the distribution is going to be. Last week, Saquon Barkley saw around 50% of the snaps. Devontae Booker saw close to 40. And then Brightwell got around 13 to 15% of the snaps. So it's going to be really mixed up. And we just saw a report that said Saquon Barkley is not going to be fully unleashed yet. So it's still going to be a limited workload. We know he's coming off the knee injury from last year. So I do not want to pay $10,000 for Saquon Barkley in a very tough matchup on the road in Washington, one of the best defenses in football. So I think that's a pretty easy fade for me. I would much rather get these skill position players from Washington, even Taylor Heineke, at their price points, which are pretty close to Saquon Barkley. I feel like Barkley should be closer to the 7 to 8K range to make it at least a little bit enticing. Because for a guy that's not fully healthy at $10,000 in a tough road matchup, I'm probably not going to have much exposure to Barkley here. He's going to have to get lucky with touchdowns. I don't think he's going to have over 100 yards on the ground. If he can get 1 to 2 touchdowns on the goal line, sure, that can work out, but that's not something I really want to bank on. As for the other guys, they are cheaper, but their snaps are going to probably get lower and lower as the season progresses. The guy you'd want would be Devontae Booker at $2,800 because he's at least going to have some workload. But for the most part, I'm going to be pretty heavy on the Washington offense, and I'll probably run it back with one of the Giants wide receivers. So then moving to our lineup, the only question here is, do I want to play Antonio Gibson in the captain spot, or do I want to go with him in the flex spot? I love him in the captain spot. I personally think he's one of the best plays in the entire slate. The problem is he is quite expensive, so if we plug in Antonio Gibson here, he's $14,400 in the captain, which would give us $6,300 per player, which is doable. I'm not sure if I'll be able to afford each and every single player I want, but I think it is possible. So for right now, let's plug him in. If we have to drop to a McLaurin, I think that's fine. Or maybe even a Logan Thomas, but we'll have to wait and see there. On to our wide receiver position, we're going to start with the Washington group first. We have Terry McLaurin, Adam Humphries, and De'Ami Brown. You can throw in Cam Sims there, but he didn't really play enough snaps to be too relevant last week, but he'll be on the field a little bit. But obviously, the McLaurin's the guy you're going to want the most. He's $9,000. I feel like he's a bit cheap here. Probably could be closer to $10,000, but definitely going to try to fit him in just because he's the alpha dog there. He's going to get plenty of involvement. I know he only had 4 targets last week, but it's going to be hard to pass up Terry McLaurin, in my opinion. Decent matchup here versus the Giants secondary. We were 22nd DVA versus the pass last season, although they were kind of stingy versus wide receivers, but McLaurin's good enough to where I think it can work out. Obviously, a downgraded quarterback for him without Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I will try my best to fit in Scary Terry here. Then you have Adam Humphries, who played around 60% of the snaps last week. Obviously not an exciting option, more of a possession wide receiver. Only had 9.5% target share last week. Mind, that's only a 1 week sample size, so you hate to put too much into it. But I think Humphries is fine for PPRs like DraftKings just because he could potentially get peppered on the possession targets. I do wish he was a bit cheaper, but the guy I like the most here is De'Ami Brown at $1,400 and only had 1 catch last week for -2 yards. But he had 4 targets, which was a 19% target share, and he played 93% of the snaps. 93% of the snaps for a guy that's dirt cheap at $1,400. He's going to be on the field. All he has to do is get a few catches, and he pays out $1,400 all day. If you want to put him in the captain spot, it's very risky, but I do think it's possible if you want to fit in all the studs in this game. But in the flex spot, I think if you're playing cash games, you're just going to lock and load him because he is way too cheap, in my opinion. Honestly, I think you can make a case for him being more expensive than Adam Humphries, but you're getting him at a $3,000 discount, so I would take that all day. And moving on to the Giants wide receiver group, they're all kind of close-knit together, so it's really hard to pick your favorite one here. If I had to pick, though, I like Sterling Shepard the most at $8,000. He was very productive last week, had a 25% target share on 9 targets, 7 catches, got over 100 yards. Obviously, the matchup versus Washington isn't that great. This season, they were 2nd DVA versus the pass and allowed the 3rd fewest points per game to the wide receiver position. But we have to use a giant here. I don't want to use anybody from the running game because I think it looks really gross, especially at Saquon Barkley's price. And we got to use someone. I don't really like any of the Giants tight end. For the run back option in most of our labs, it's going to be one of these Giants wide receivers. Now you can make a case for Galladay, Sterling Shepard, or Darius Slayton. Galladay and Slayton are more down the field threats, while Sterling Shepard is your safer option due to the fact that he plays mostly out of the slot. He's more of a possession wide receiver, and he was good last week. The guy's a very talented wide receiver. Daniel Jones definitely looked his way quite a bit, and I can see that happening once again here, especially if he's getting pressured all day, which I assume is probably going to happen versus that defensive front. Really, for me, when I'm stacking up Washington, I'm either running back with Sterling Shepard, preferably, or if you want to go with Galladay and Slate, I don't hate that. They should have lower ownership. So moving on to the rest of our lineup here, I would like to get Terry McLaurin in. I know it's getting a bit expensive here because we have the 3 most expensive players on Washington with Gibson, Heineke, and Terry McLaurin. It leaves us $5,400 left per player, but like I was saying earlier, there is a massive value play on this slate with De'Ami Brown. He's only $1,400 and he played nearly the entire game last week. So we'll throw him in, and then it beefs us up to $7,500. So with that, we should be able to fit in one of these run back options on the Giants with either Sterling Shepard, Kenny Galladay, Darius Slayton. Just for example, if we put in Sterling Shepard here, that would leave us $7,000 left per player, which kind of sucks because we can't fit in Logan Thomas. But we'll talk about defense and kicker first before we end up finishing this lineup off. And moving on to the tight end position, Evan Ingram is going to be out once again this week for the Giants, so we're going to have Kyle Rudolph and Caden Smith taking the snaps at tight end for them this week. Kyle Rudolph was the guy you wanted, though. Caden Smith was not involved whatsoever in the passing game. He still played half the snaps, close to 50%, 48 to be exact, but no targets, and obviously we need some targets to be valuable in DFS. Kyle Rudolph was the guy for that, played close to 80% of the snaps. He had 5 targets, which was around a 14% target share. Obviously not in love with it. Kyle Rudolph is not the most exciting play ever, but if you're looking for a run back option and you can't quite afford guys like Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, or whatever it may be, I don't think he's a terrible value play, because if he finds the end zone, he'll be a decent value play at $3,200. And as for Logan Thomas, he is the clear tight end one in this offense. $7,400, played 60% of the snaps in the slot last week. He's a very good pass catching option. We saw that last year. While he wasn't super involved last week with only 3 targets, only 14.2% target share, he still found the end zone, and he should be one of the more productive tight ends this season. So if you had the money for him, great. If not, I don't think it's the end of the world, because I do prefer some of the other options compared to him. But I do think he's a very strong range play here in what is a good matchup versus the New York Giants. And as far as defenses go, I don't typically like to talk about these guys too much, but I actually think they're both viable on this slate. Obviously, if I had to pick one, I'm preferring Washington. I think they're going to get a lot of pressure on Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones is a guy that will turn the ball over a lot, fumbles the ball, gets sacks. You can sign me up for the Washington football team defense. I'm not sure if I want to captain them. You can. You just really limit your upside, but you need a defensive touchdown for that to work out usually. So mainly more of a flex play. The football team is certainly in play here as home favorites, only an 18.75 implied team total against them. I think their defensive line is going to wreak havoc on Daniel Jones, should force him into some bad decisions. I'll take that all day. As for the Giants, I'm mainly stacking the Washington football team. Probably won't have too much interest in the Giants, although in the stacks that you're fading Washington or Giants defensive lineups in there, just in case Heineke happens to be absolutely awful. Like, he's not the best quarterback out there. I realize the Giants are the underdogs here, but they still only have a 22.25 implied team total against them. It's only a 3.5 point spread. It's not out of the equation where the Giants can get some turnovers and end up only giving up like 10 to 13 points. It's possible. Not saying it's likely, but it is in the cards here. I would have very low ownership to the Giants, but I do like the football team. As far as kickers go, you really can't project them. If they hit their field goals, they hit their field goals and become decent value plays, but they can't throw the ball, they can't run the ball or catch the ball or score touchdowns, so the upside is very limited. So hoping the offensive drive stall out so they can get field goals and end up being decent value plays. So if you want to play them, sure, go for it. They are relatively safe because there's always going to be field goal opportunities, and what the way this game is, the 41 over under, tight spread, defenses should be able to stall out drives. We could see a lot of field goals. This could end up field goal fest, which if that's the case, yeah, I get some kickers in their lineup. I don't usually want to go kicker in the captain spot, but if you want to get nuts, maybe like a few percentages of that in 150 max builds might not be the worst way to go how this game could potentially play out. Then just filling out the rest of this lineup, the only guy we could afford would be Darius Slayton for anyone that I want to actually roster. That would leave you $400 left on the table, although this does feel like more of a tournament lineup. But you could go either way. You could move McLaurin in the captain spot. You could put Gibson at flex. That would save you a little bit of money. Maybe you can afford a guy you like more. Maybe we'd be able to get a Logan Thomas. Have to double check that. So if we put McLaurin in at captain, that should save us a little bit of money. $7,300, we're actually 100 off of Logan Thomas. So you'd have to play around with it a little bit more, but there is ways to make this work. Now, if you want to go crazy, go De'Ami Brown in the captain spot. You can pretty much play anybody you want. Now, I actually think people will do this just because he is that cheap, and a guy that's going to be on the field playing the majority of the snaps that should get targets in this offense, the team we prefer in Washington tonight, it might not be the worst way to go. Like, he's only $2,100 in the captain spot. It leaves you nearly $10,000 left per player, so you can pretty much play anybody. We can get Heineke in easily. Antonio Gibson, easily. Terry McLaurin fits in. We still have $9,500 left per player, so we can pretty much play whoever the heck we want. Obviously, we need one Giants player, and if you want to use the quarterback, sure. Then we still have $8,700. You can pair him up with Sterling Shepard. I don't hate that. I know it's a little bit risky using Brown in the captain spot, and if one of these guys like Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, or whatever go off, you're going to fall really behind if De'Ami Brown only gets you a handful of points. But you can really load up your offense, like Heineke, Gibson, McLaurin, Daniel Jones, Sterling Shepard, and De'Ami Brown. So there's multiple ways to go. And again, take some more time to build lineups than I did just now. I'm going to play around with my optimizer, using settings and things like that to get everything fine-tuned. But hopefully this video was helpful. And if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. It's just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can use code CPEN to get a free money bonus. Deposit match up to $100 when you tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next video.